The forest was quiet, too quiet, as if the world had forgotten to breathe. Fog curled around the trees in slow, pale tendrils, hiding the trail beneath my feet. The light from my flashlight trembled across gnarled roots and damp moss, casting fleeting shadows that seemed almost alive. Somewhere, a faint hum echoed, not the wind, not an animal, something else. My heart slowed, then quickened, caught between curiosity and the pull of unease. Every step I took felt measured by eyes I couldn't see. And then, a sudden flash of white, stark against the fog, lit the mountainside, and for a heartbeat, the world was silent, except for that hum. I froze. My breath rose in clouds, curling around my fingers as I reached for my jacket. That's when I saw it. It was late, the kind of late where the sky loses its color, and everything turns gray. The air felt damp against my skin. A thin mist curled through the trees, soft as breath, cold as memory. I stood at the edge of the trail, narrow, twisting, almost swallowed by fog. Every step I took sank into the wet soil. The ground made no sound, yet I could feel it pulse beneath me, alive in a quiet way. A faint humming drifted between the trees, low, steady like wires beneath the earth. I followed it, not because I wanted to, but because standing still felt worse. The deeper I went, the less the world looked real. The trees leaned inward, their shapes warped through the haze. Light flickered somewhere ahead, pale, uncertain, as though the forest was breathing with it. I kept my eyes on that light. It blinked once, then twice, then vanished. The humming grew louder. It wasn't mechanical. It wasn't alive either. It was something between the two. I whispered my own name once, to remind myself I was real. It disappeared into the fog, swallowed whole. Somewhere behind me, leaves rustled, soft, deliberate. I turned. Nothing, just a fog pressing against itself, folding in slow motion. I started walking faster. The mist thickened, wrapping around my arms like wet cloth. It smelled faintly of iron and rain. The light returned, a thin flicker through the branches. Closer now, unsteady. I could see the path bending sharply to the left. Something moved just beyond it, a shadow that didn't match the trees. It shifted as I breathed, sliding between trunks, its shape bending, stretching, watching. The hum deepened, like a voice behind a wall. Each note felt heavier, pressing against my chest. I stopped. My pulse stuttered, echoing the rhythm of that invisible hum. Something was waiting up ahead. I couldn't see it, but the air trembled around it, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. I told myself to turn back, but my body didn't listen. My legs kept moving. The path narrowed even more. Branches brushed my shoulders. Their tips felt brittle, like fingers testing for warmth. The light flickered again, this time behind me. I turned too fast. A shadow rippled through the fog. Tall, still, almost human. I blinked and it was gone. The humming stopped. Everything fell into silence, a silence so complete that I could hear my heartbeat stutter and the faint whisper of my own breath. For a moment, I thought the world had ended. Then, faintly, the hum started again. But it came from everywhere at once. Above me, behind me, inside me, it pulsed with the light. Soft flashes breaking through the mist, flickering faster now, like a signal struggling to reach me. Each flash revealed a fragment of the trail, a fallen branch, a print in the mud, a shadow that moved when I didn't. My throat tightened. The air felt heavy metallic. Something brushed my sleeve, gentle, almost curious. I jerked away, but nothing was there. The trees seemed to bend closer, their trunks warping around the narrow path. The mist clung to my face like damp hands. I could taste it now, cold, earthy, with something sweet and rotting beneath. The flickering light began to fade, slowly, as though someone was dimming it from far away. The hum followed, its final note stretching out until it became silence again. I stopped walking. The path ahead dissolved into white. Behind me, nothing but gray and shadow. I realized then I didn't know which way I had come from. The forest felt endless. Breathing, listening. I closed my eyes and tried to hear my own thoughts. But all I could feel was that quiet, unnatural stillness. Somewhere in the distance, a single flicker broke through the mist. Just one, barely there. And before I could move toward it, it blinked out. The forest sighed. And I was alone. It was colder tonight. The kind of cold that moved through the air like thought. Quiet, searching, finding its way under my skin. The forest stretched out ahead, dark and endless, its tall pines swaying with a slow rhythm. Each breath came out white, vanishing before it reached the branches. The path was softer here, carpeted in fallen needles that muted every step. For a while, there was only the wind, and then something else. A voice, faint, threaded through the breeze. Too soft to understand, but too clear to ignore. It wasn't coming from one direction. It moved with the air, curling through the trees, slipping past my ear, then gone. I stopped walking. The forest didn't. The branches kept moving, whispering against each other like words meant for someone else. My heart started to slow, then pick up again. The space between beats felt longer than it should. I told myself it was wind. It had to be, but the wind doesn't speak. The voice came again, closer this time, clearer. Still not a word I could name, but something in it sounded familiar. It carried warmth, a tone that almost sounded like recognition. I took a step forward. The ground answered with a soft crackle. The needles shifted, as if something unseen had moved beside me. I froze. There was pressure in the air, a quiet vibration that touched everything. The soil, the trees, my ribs. Then came another voice, not from the same place. Higher, overlapping the first. They wove together, fluttering like moth wings in the dark. I couldn't tell how many there were. Maybe 2, maybe 20, all of them whispering, just below meaning. I turned toward the sound, but the forest looked the same. Still, empty. I tried to listen harder. The air thickened around me, and with it came a smell, damp bark, old rain, something faintly metallic. The whispers deepened, closer now, moving between the trees, circling, like they were testing distance. I want to call out, but my throat locked. The quiet pressed against my mouth like a hand. Every pine needle on the ground trembled. They shifted, rustling under invisible feet. Each step drew nearer. Slow, measured. The air seemed to ripple around those sounds, as though the forest itself was bending to let them through. I backed away. 1 step, 2. The whispers followed. A cold breath grazed the side of my neck. I turned sharply. Nothing but trees, tall, patient, unmoved. I felt something then, not fear exactly, but a kind of knowing that I wasn't walking alone anymore. The path ahead opened into a clearing, wide, silent. The mist hung lower here, like it didn't want to rise. I stepped into it slowly. The whispering faded to a hum, deep and electric, buzzing faintly through my teeth. And above me light, not moonlight, not stars. Something else. Pale orbs hovered in the air, far above the tree line, drifting in slow, uneven motion. Each one shimmered, flickering between white and blue, like static caught in glass. They moved in silence, yet every shift they made sent a soft pulse to the ground beneath me. My chest felt weightless, not from awe, but from something colder. I stared up, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shape within the light. Tall, blurry, turning its head toward me. The hum thinned to a whisper again, a single tone, hovering at the edge of hearing. And somewhere inside that sound, a word almost formed. Almost. I blinked and the lights dimmed. The air stilled. The whispers vanished. Only the trees remained motionless, watching. I stood there, waiting for the voices to return. But all that came was the wind, soft, empty, carrying nothing, and everything I couldn't name. The air was thinner up here, sharp, dry, carrying the faint taste of stone. The ridge stretched out like a broken spine, its edges fading into fog. I could barely see the path anymore, just pale outlines of rock and the slow drift of mist against my boots. Somewhere below, the forest hummed quietly beneath its blanket of gray, distant, unreachable. I stopped for a moment to breathe. Each inhale scraped a little. The cold felt clean, too clean, like the world had been washed of everything alive. Then, through the haze, something caught my eye. A flash, Quick, metallic. It came from somewhere across the ridge. Far enough to be unreal, but bright enough to pull at me. I blinked, waited. Nothing. Then it came again. Sharper this time. A streak of light that sliced through the fog and vanished just as fast. I stared into the white void ahead. The wind shifted, carrying a low hum that trembled through the air. Faint, like a wire under tension. I lifted my flashlight. The beam struggled against the mist, cutting a narrow tunnel through the white. Every flake of fog caught the light, spinning like dust in water. I took a step forward. The rocks crunched underfoot, dry and hollow. Something about the sound felt wrong, like it was echoing from too far away. The glint flashed again, brighter now, almost gold. I felt my stomach twist. It wasn't sunlight. The sky above was thick, colorless, empty. I walked toward it, careful, slow. The air cooled even more. Thin mist gathering around my knees and my waist, curling upward like breath. My flashlight began to flicker. A faint buzz rolled through the handle, soft vibrations under my palm. I shook it once. The light steadied. For a moment, and then something moved in the fog. Not quickly, not in panic. Just a gentle shift. A shape unfolding between the pale trees ahead. It didn't have an outline, only the faint suggestion of motion, like fog remembering how to move as a body. I froze. The flashlight dimmed again, its beam sputtering in small bursts. Each pulse of light carved a different scene into view. Rock, mist, something standing. When the light steadied, the shape was gone. Only fog, only silence. I turned the beam toward the ridge again, and there it was, that glint, hanging in the air for a heartbeat, a sharp metallic shimmer, like a mirror catching its own reflection. My pulse slowed and quickened at once. It wasn't moving closer, but the fog was wrapping tighter around it, folding inward until it almost seemed to breathe. I could hear my own breath now, ragged, loud. The hum returned, barely audible, vibrating through the ground. It filled my ears without sound, like pressure. The glint wavered, fading in and out as if caught between layers of air. Then it bent, a ripple of light stretching sideways, like metal softening in heat. I took another step, but the ridge groaned beneath me. Loose stones slid into the mist below, vanishing before I heard them land. The flashlight flickered once more, a hard flash, then total darkness. My eyes adjusted slowly. The fog glowed faintly, lit from somewhere deep within itself. And in that glow, shapes began to form. Tall silhouettes, thin as shadows, turning ever so slightly. They shimmered like reflections on broken glass. Their 1 second bent the next. My breath caught. The metallic taste in the air thickened, like ozone after lightning. For one brief moment, everything was still. Then the glint, the same sharp flash, burst across the fog again, so bright it burned into my eyes. When it faded, the shapes were gone. The ridge was empty. Only the mist remained, swaying softly, as if nothing had moved at all. I clicked the flashlight back on. It hummed weakly, casting a narrow circle of pale light across the rocks. No glint, no movement, just fog, thick, endless. I stood there until the cold reached my bones, until my thoughts felt quiet enough to belong to the mountain. That flash, that impossible shimmer, was gone, but the image of it stayed behind, pressed into my mind like a memory that never really happened. And when I finally turned to leave, the mist behind me seemed to shift again, slow, breathing, almost like something was watching the ridge from the other side of the fog. Night had settled deep into the forest, the kind of dark that didn't move. It just breathed. The air was cold, and still enough that even my footsteps felt too loud. Somewhere between the trees, a thin mist clung low to the ground, soft, silver, curling between roots and stones. I carried a small radio in my pack. Old, scratched, its antenna bent from years of use. For hours it had been quiet, only the faint hum of batteries dying slowly. Then, without warning, it began to whisper, a crackle, a flicker of static that rippled through the silence. I stopped walking. The sound came and went, uneven, like someone trying to breathe through the speaker. I turned the dial slowly. Each movement brought a different texture of noise, some high and thin, others low and heavy, like wind trapped inside metal. Then a pattern. The static pulsed. Soft, then sharp. Soft again. Almost like rhythm. I held my breath. Between the bursts, there was something faint. Not words, but almost, as if the silence was learning how to speak. I waited, listening. The trees leaned in. Somewhere close, branches creaked against each other. A dry, tired sound. But beneath it, the static continued to pulse. It wasn't random anymore. Each burst came at the same interval, as though following a heartbeat. Mine, maybe? I turned off the flashlight. Let the dark take over. For a moment, the only light came from the radio's tiny red glow. It pulsed with the same rhythm. Breathing. The mist thickened. It moved differently now, not drifting, but pulsing, matching the static. My chest tightened. The forest around me had gone quiet. Too quiet. No wind. No rustle. Just the radio and the slow beat of something unseen. I crouched down, placing the radio on the ground. The dirt was cold, damp, smelling faintly of pine and iron. The static grew louder, harsher, but still deliberate. It was almost saying something. I could hear breaks, pauses, a rhythm that felt like speech. But the words refused to form. I leaned closer. The air around the radio buzzed. Tiny hairs on my arm lifting with the charge. It felt alive. Then the light on the dial flickered. Once, twice, gone. The static stopped. The silence that followed wasn't silence at all. It pressed in from every side. Thick, heavy, alive with listening. Somewhere behind me, a shadow shifted. Not a movement. Not exactly. But the darkness itself seemed to breathe in. I turned slowly. Every tree looked the same. But the space between them didn't. It pulsed faintly, as though the air itself had texture. The rhythm returned, not from the radio this time, but from the forest, a deep, low hum vibrating through the ground. My knees felt weak. I reached for the radio, but the metal casing burned cold against my fingers. The static crackled to life again, this time clearer. It rose in pitch, soft and piercing, and in between a whisper, a word I couldn't understand, then another, then nothing. The hum faded. The forest fell still. I stayed frozen, hand hovering above the radio, waiting for something, a sound, a shape, a sign. But the only thing that came was my own reflection in the radio's dim glass, distorted, stretching with every flicker of light. The static eased into quiet. The mist began to settle again, drifting low, calm, as if nothing had ever moved. I lifted the radio carefully. It was warm now, too warm. The metal hissed faintly under my touch. I didn't turn it off, didn't dare. As I started walking again, the static followed, soft, steady, almost comforting. Almost. Each step echoed through the trees, and for every echo, I could swear there was another set of footsteps matching mine, half a beat behind. I didn't look back. The static whispered once more, low, broken. And just before it faded, a single breath slipped through the noise. It sounded like someone trying to say my name. The fog came back tonight, low and quiet, like it had been waiting. It clung to the ground in thin ribbons, curling around my ankles as I walked. Each breath drew it closer, cold against my skin, damp against my throat. The forest was still. No wind, no insects, just the slow rhythm of my steps and the soft press of mist between the trees. The trail looked different tonight. Narrower, uneven. Something about it felt rearranged. I shone my light downward. At first, I thought they were just stones, small, smooth, scattered along the path. But then I saw the pattern. They weren't random. Each one placed deliberately, curved in slow arcs along the edges of the trail. And their surfaces, they shimmered, not like wet rock, not like glass. Something else, pale, reflective, as if catching light that wasn't mine. I knelt to see closer. The stone was cold, smoother than it should have been. When I turned it slightly, the reflection shifted, and for a second, it almost looked back. I dropped it. It landed softly in the moss, but I could still feel its weight in my hand, a faint hum like static under my skin. I told myself it was nothing, Just nerves. Just the fog playing tricks again. But as I kept walking, the arrangement continued. More stones, each one brighter than the last. Their faint gleam followed me, a trail of dim, watching light. I slowed my pace. The air had grown thicker, almost metallic. Every inhale carried the smell of damp soil and something faintly sweet, like old wood beginning to rot. The stones on either side of the path seemed to tilt slightly as I passed, their pale glow shifting, tracking movement. I looked back once. Dozens of them lined the way behind me, all faintly shining through the fog, like eyes just beginning to open. I turned forward again, trying not to notice, trying not to see the way they seemed closer now. The forest pressed in tighter. Branches overhead hung lower, their needles glistening with mist. Each droplet that fell made the ground pulse faintly with light, a rhythm that wasn't random anymore. My steps grew slower. The stones seemed to breathe. With every exhale, their pale sheen expanded, then dimmed again. I stopped, and the light stopped too. Silence, only fog, and the faint echo of my heartbeat beneath it. I crouched again, looking at one of the stones nearest my foot. It glowed softly, as if lit from inside. No warmth, just the faintest flicker, steady and aware. My reflection appeared in it, stretched, bent, strangely alive. Then, just for a moment, it blinked. I stepped back too fast. My heel crushed another stone, and the light beneath it went out instantly, as though I'd killed something. The others grew brighter. All at once, the pale shimmer thickened, filling the fog around me with scattered light. It wasn't harsh. It was quiet, curious. I felt watched, not hunted, just observed. Every instinct told me to keep still, to let the moment pass. The fog shifted, curling upward in small spirals. The light from the stones reflected off it, forming faint shapes, tall, fragile things that leaned closer but never touched the ground. They swayed gently, their movements matching the faint tremor in my chest. I couldn't breathe for a while. Didn't want to. It felt like even that would break something sacred. Then, just as quietly as it began, the light began to fade. Each stone dimmed in slow succession, one by one, until the trail was dark again. Only the fog remained, settling softly over them like a closing eye. I waited a long time before moving. The stillness had weight now, a fragile kind of silence that held everything together. When I finally stepped forward, the stone stayed still, cold, ordinary, but the feeling didn't leave. Even after the path straightened, even when the forest thinned, I could still sense them, quiet, patient, blinking somewhere in the dark behind me. And as the last trace of fog slipped past my ankles, I realized something simple, something heavy. The trail wasn't made to guide me through. It was made to watch me go. The air was still tonight, completely still. No wind moved through the trees. No leaves trembled. Even the fog seemed hesitant to drift. I could hear my own breath, slow, uneven, pulling against the quiet like it didn't belong here. The forest was waiting. That's how it felt. Heavy with something I couldn't name. I followed the narrow path, the same one that curved past the hollow trees, and vanished deeper into the dark. The ground was soft, a mix of damp soil and decaying pine. Each step pressed out a faint, wet sigh. Above me, the branches were perfectly still, outlined in the pale fog. They hung like veins drawn across the sky. Then one of them moved. Not much, just a slow sway, too deliberate for wind that wasn't there. I stopped, waited. Another branch shivered, farther down the path. Then another. It moved in a pattern, a rhythm I could almost follow, like something was making its way through the canopy, from tree to tree. The rustling came next, soft, distant, but layered, as if 100 tiny movements happened all at once. Leaves brushed together above me. A faint scraping sound, dry and steady, like claws grazing bark. I held my breath. The air felt heavier now, colder around my shoulders. Something was up there, moving carefully, staying just out of sight. I tilted my head back, searching the black branches above the fog line. For a second, I thought I saw it. A shadow leaping from one tree to the next, fast, low, with a shape that didn't make sense. Too long, too uneven. The arms. If they were arms, moved like branches bending in reverse. The fog seemed to react to it, shifting in waves where it passed, like the air itself was bending around it. The rustling grew louder, closer. It circled, the movement overlapping itself, as if there was more than one. Then everything went silent again. I could feel my pulse in my hands. It echoed faintly in my ears, matching the soft hum of the stillness that followed. I took one step forward, and that was when I heard it, a whisper carried low through the fog. It wasn't clear, just fragments, threads of voice pulled apart by distance. The words dissolved as soon as I tried to understand them. They came from above, from the same place where the branches hung motionless now. Something brushed the top of my head, a single drop of moisture, cold enough to sting. I looked up again. The fog had thickened near the canopy. Pale shapes moved behind it, thin and erratic, not light, not shadow. Something between the two. The whispers wove through them, soft, circling, as if they were talking to each other in a language that didn't need sound. A sudden weight pressed against the air. The trees creaked. Their branches shifted all at once, not breaking, but bending away, like they were trying to move aside. Something passed through them. It didn't fall. It didn't climb. It flowed from tree to tree, the shape folding and stretching as it went. I caught another glimpse, a flicker of pale limbs, bent the wrong way, a head that wasn't shaped right, eyes that didn't shine, but absorbed what little light there was. Then it was gone again. The rustling faded into the distance. The branches stopped moving. I stood there until the stillness returned, thick and suffocating, as if the forest itself was holding its breath again. The fog pressed closer, soft against my face, leaving the faint smell of wet bark and ash. The path ahead disappeared into it, swallowed by the gray. I thought about turning back, but the forest behind me felt heavier than the one in front. So I kept walking, slowly, carefully, listening for another shift above. Once, I thought I heard again the faint creak of weight settling on high branches, but it didn't move this time. Whatever it was, it stayed there, watching from the dark canopy, hidden behind layers of fog and silence. The whispers followed me for a while, not chasing, just drifting, fading with every step until they became part of the air itself. By the time the trees began to thin, the rustling had stopped completely. Only the memory of it remained, quiet and patient, somewhere high above the path. And I couldn't shake the feeling that if I looked up again, if I dared to break the stillness, I would see it there, waiting among the branches that sway when the wind does not. The air turned colder as I moved deeper into the woods. Not the kind of cold that stings, the kind that settles in slowly, like something pressing against your skin from the inside. The fog was thicker here. It wrapped around the trees, soft and colorless, like the forest was trying to hide itself. My breath drifted in front of me, pale and fragile, hanging in the air longer than it should. Each exhale lingered, slow to fade, as if the cold wanted to keep it. The ground was frozen in places, crunching faintly beneath my boots. Every sound felt wrong, too loud against the silence. I stopped once, listened. Nothing moved. No leaves, no animals, just a slow hum of stillness, dense and waiting. But then there was something, a low vibration, barely there at first, like the forest had a pulse deep beneath the roots. It came from far ahead, a faint hum, steady, constant. I couldn't tell if it was mechanical or alive. Each time I breathed out, the fog seemed to shimmer around the sound, rippling in slow motion. I took another step forward. The hum grew stronger, a dull resonance under my ribs. It wasn't loud. It was felt more than heard. The cold deepened. My fingers stiffened against the straps of my pack. Even the trees looked colder now, their bark glistening with thin sheets of frost. The path curved and the fog pressed tighter. I could barely see my own feet. My flashlight's beam fractured in the mist, breaking into thin columns of pale gold. Then something moved within it, a shape, or maybe just a shadow, passed between the trees. Slow, measured. The fog swallowed it instantly, but I could feel where it had been. The air there trembled. I waited, counted my breaths. The hum pulsed again, this time closer. It came in waves, rolling through the ground, up through the soles of my shoes, into my chest. My breath caught. For a heartbeat, the fog in front of me shifted, like something exhaled back. It wasn't the wind. The trees didn't move. But I saw the fog stir and curl toward me, as if mimicking my breathing. In, out, and again. The rhythm matched mine, then slowly began to lead. My lungs followed without meaning to. The hum deepened, richer, resonant. It felt like it was calling, pulling from somewhere further in. I wanted to stop walking, but the pull was subtle, magnetic, like gravity had changed direction. The ground sloped downward. The fog glowed faintly now, a muted silver, as if something was shining from beneath it. The trees grew sparse. The air was sharp enough to taste metallic, like frost and static. And then the forest fell silent again. The hum cut off. No echo, no fade, just gone. My breath rushed into the space it left behind, loud, uneven. The fog hung still, a wall of white. I stepped closer. The cold there was worse. It prickled across my face, burning where it touched. And within the white, a faint shimmer. Not light, not movement. Something in between. It pulsed once, softly, as if answering the silence. I took a step back. My heel broke through a patch of frost. The sound cracked through the air like glass. Instantly, the shimmer vanished. The fog rippled outward, and the hum returned. But it wasn't distant anymore. It was behind me. A vibration brushed the back of my neck, low and warm, like a whisper too deep to understand. I didn't turn. I couldn't. The air around me held still again, and the fog froze in place, suspended mid-drift. Even my breath stopped moving. The hum softened, sliding into the quiet until it felt like part of it. Then, slowly, my breath returned. It came out in short, clouded bursts, each one smaller than the last. When I looked around, the forest seemed different. Emptier, colder. The fog began to thin, retreating between the trees. Whatever had been there, whatever had hummed from beneath the roots, had gone silent again, but the air still vibrated faintly. My breath still lingered longer than it should. And even as I turned back toward the trail, I knew something was still breathing out here. It just wasn't me. The trees opened suddenly. No warning, no break in the fog to prepare me. One moment, I was surrounded by trunks and silence. The next, the ground widened into a clearing, smooth, round, too perfect to be natural. The air here was heavier. Still, every breath felt weighed down, as though the fog itself resisted being disturbed. I stood at the edge, my boots sinking slightly into damp soil. Pine needles clung to my ankles, cold and slick with dew. Above, the moon hung low, pale and distant behind a shroud of drifting mist. Its light bled to the fog in thin ribbons, silver against the dark. And then I saw them, shapes metallic, silent, hovering just above the clearing. They weren't large, not exactly, but their edges were sharp, unnatural against the soft glow of the night. Each one turned slowly, as if the air itself were holding them in place. Moonlight slid over their surfaces, reflecting in small, sudden bursts, like flashes from a hidden mirror. The reflections flickered across the fog, bouncing off the trees, touching everything in faint, ghostly light. I felt something inside my chest tighten. Not fear at first, just awe, a quiet pull toward the center of that light. The silence pressed harder. It was a kind that hums behind the ears, where even your own heartbeat feels too loud. I stepped closer. The fog curled at my ankles, thin tendrils rising and falling, breathing in rhythm with my movements. The metallic forms shifted, just slightly, like they had noticed. I froze, watched. They hung there, motionless again. But the air had changed. Something high above stirred. Not movement, exactly, just awareness. A weight in the dark that wasn't there before. I tilted my head upward, expecting to see more of them, but the fog swallowed the sky whole. Nothing but the faint shimmer of moonlight and the slow drift of vapor curling down. The trees around the clearing leaned inward, their branches bowing as if listening. The silence grew thicker, a pressure against the sides of my face, against the back of my neck. It felt like I'd stepped into a hell breath, the entire forest waiting. My hands were cold. I didn't remember taking another step, but I was closer now, The metallic shapes hovered only a few feet away. Each one reflected me, distorted, bent, stretched across its surface like melted glass. I could see my outline multiplied again and again, tiny echoes of myself staring back. And then one of them moved. It tilted, slowly rotating in the air, and the reflection changed. For a moment, it wasn't my face looking back. The features were wrong. The outline sharper, eyes too far apart, mouth still, but slightly open as if waiting to breathe. My chest tightened. The fog thickened around my knees, curling faster now, rising like smoke from unseen embers. The hovering shapes trembled in the air, each movement sending ripples through the mist. It was mesmerizing and unbearable. I wanted to look away, but something in the silence held me there. The air shifted above me again. Not the wind. It was gentler, like a presence moving without sound. My breath escaped in a visible plume. It lingered in front of my face, then drifted upward, straight into the fog. Something caught it, the vapor still midair, then dispersed, as if swallowed by something unseen. I stepped back. The soil beneath me gave a faint creak, a hollow sound. The hovering shapes turned again, this time together. Their mirrored surfaces flashed all at once, and for a brief, blinding moment, the clearing was filled with silver light. It wasn't bright enough to hurt, but it froze everything. Even the fog stopped moving. In that suspended glow, I could see the trees at the edge of the clearing, and in their branches, shadows. Dozens of them, still, watching. Not people, not quite shapes, either. Just a faint suggestion of something higher than human, leaning forward through the haze. My breath hitched. The light faded. When my vision returned, the metallic forms were gone. The clearing was empty again. Only the fog remained, rolling soft, unbothered. The air still carried that weight, but whatever had been there had moved on. I stood in silence for a long time, waiting for the forest to breathe again. Eventually, it did. A faint rustle from the pines, a whisper of cold wind that hadn't been there before. I turned to leave. The mist parted slightly around me, as if making space. And as I stepped back into the line of trees, something high above shifted once more, slow, deliberate, almost curious. The fog trembled, catching a trace of moonlight, and I realized whatever was watching hadn't looked away. The forest was darker tonight. Even the moon felt distant, hidden behind layers of unmoving fog. Each breath I took lingered in front of me, curling into soft spirals before fading into the mist. The air smelled faintly of wet bark and metal. My footsteps were slow, measured. Each one vanished into the silence as though the ground absorbed it. Then, between the trees, something began to glow. At first, I thought it was a reflection, moonlight caught in the mist, but it was too steady, too alive. A faint orb floated low near the ground, about the height of my knees. It drifted forward slowly, weaving through the fog, pulsing with pale white light. I stopped breathing, just watched. The light wasn't harsh. It felt soft, like it didn't want to scare me, only be seen. It moved again, a slow glide between the trees. Every pulse dimmed the world around it, as if the forest inhaled whenever it brightened. The mist thickened, shapes faded, then returned, never quite the same. I stepped closer. The orb reacted, not retreating, but circling slightly like it was waiting. The light shimmered against the fog, and for an instant I saw faces. Faint, barely there, pressed into the haze like reflections on glass. Eyes, mouths, expressions too quick to name. As soon as I looked directly, they vanished, the fog returning to its usual shifting silence. My heart felt slow, too slow. Each beat echoed in my chest like it didn't belong to me. The orb pulsed again. It brightened this time, and the fog around it thinned, revealing a small patch of forest floor, untouched, almost glowing on its own. Everywhere else, the world remained dim, colorless. I knelt slightly, trying to see what it hovered above, but there was nothing, just soil and a faint shimmer of moisture collecting on pine roots. The light swayed, once to the left, once to the right, then back to stillness. I could hear faint movement in the distance, a shifting, like weight pressing gently against the ground far away. The orb flickered. The fog around it trembled in small waves. I blinked, and for a split second, the faces returned, clearer now, closer. They didn't move, didn't breathe, just hung there, half-formed in the mist, their eyes open too wide. The light dimmed again, and they were gone. I stood frozen, unsure if they'd ever been there at all. The silence deepened. It wasn't empty, it was waiting. The orb floated higher, until it hovered near my chest. The glow brushed across my skin, soft warmth cutting to the cold air. It flickered once more, and I felt something change, a weight in the air, as though something unseen had stepped closer. The trees seemed to lean in. Branches curved above, their outlines vanishing into the mist. I whispered, not words, just a breath that escaped before I could stop it. The orb pulsed in response. A single flash. Then it dimmed again, its light faint and tired. It began to drift backward, deeper into the fog. I followed. Each step forward made the air colder. My skin tingled, my breath visible with every exhale. The orb grew smaller, but I couldn't stop. The mist around it shimmered like liquid glass. Every pulse revealed something hidden. A shoulder, a hand, a silhouette watching from behind the haze. I tried to look directly, but they vanished each time. Like the fog itself erased them when I noticed. The orb slowed. It hovered near a tree, its light pressing faintly against the bark. For a moment, I thought it was resting. Then it dimmed one final time. The light folded in on itself, collapsing until only a thin spark remained. It floated there, flickering weakly, and then it went out. Darkness rushed back in, complete and silent. I blinked, trying to see, but the fog was too dense now, almost solid. The space where the orb had been still glowed faintly in my vision, like a memory refusing to fade. The air was heavy again. I could feel eyes in it, not visible, not real, but present. Every direction felt the same. Every tree, every shadow, blended into one endless gray. I turned to leave, but my breath caught in my throat. A faint pulse appeared behind me. Small, distant, hovering near the ground once more. It flickered twice, softly, like a heartbeat through the mist, and I realized it wasn't the same one. There were more, hidden, waiting, breathing light into the fog. And with each pulse, the forest seemed to glow a little brighter, as if something beneath it was slowly waking up. It began low, barely there, a hum that blended with the wind, soft enough to mistake for breath. But it didn't fade. It grew, slowly, like something waking beneath the ground. I was standing in the same forest, or what was left of it through the fog. The air felt thick tonight, pressing close against my skin. Every branch seemed to listen. Every leaf trembled in the same rhythm as the sound. The hum deepened. It vibrated through the ground, up through my shoes and into my chest. I could feel it more than I could hear it. A steady pulse, buzzing behind my ribs. My breath came uneven. The air felt charged like before a storm, but colder. The fog swirled, shifting in small waves that moved with the vibration. And with each tremor, the shadows began to move, not by light, by sound. They slid across the trees, stretched, folded in on themselves. Their shapes didn't match the branches. They didn't belong to anything I could see. One leaned, another twisted along the ground, curling toward my feet. I wanted to step back, but my legs wouldn't. It was like the hum had reached inside me, tightened around my muscles, and held me there. I could taste metal in my mouth. Sharp, electric. Every heartbeat matched the vibration. The shadows thickened. They pulsed with the hum, as if breathing along with it. Something about them felt almost human. The way they leaned closer, the way they trembled before forming. One shadow separated from the rest. It moved differently, as though it were trying to speak. The fog thinned just enough to see its outline, a face barely there. No features, just the impression of where they should be. The hum climbed higher, not louder, just sharper, filling the air with invisible weight. The ground beneath me trembled, leaves rattled, branches quivered, and the air around my ears buzzed until I couldn't tell what was real. I tried to whisper something, anything, but my throat was locked. The shadow bent forward. Its edges rippled, stretching toward me like a ripple in dark water. Every instinct told me to run, but my body didn't belong to me anymore. I stood there, staring at a shape that shouldn't exist, hearing a sound that wasn't sound at all. The hum split suddenly, a low note underneath and a higher tone above it. They moved in opposite directions, like two unseen things circling each other. The shadows followed. They spun slowly, their movements unnatural, but almost graceful. It felt like they were trying to form something, a pattern, a message I couldn't understand. Then it shifted. The low tone dropped until I felt it in my stomach, and the shadows froze mid-motion. The trees leaned. The fog pressed closer, tightening around me like a heavy blanket, and the hum stopped. Just silence. Thick, immediate, impossible. For a second, I thought I'd gone deaf. Then I realized the shadows were still moving, without sound, without reason. Their mouths, if they were mouths, opened and closed slowly, mimicking speech that didn't exist. The silence was worse than the hum. It made the world feel hollow, like everything had been emptied out, and I was standing inside the shell of it. I tried again to move. This time my fingers twitched, then my legs. The moment I shifted, the shadows reacted, snapping their heads toward me as one. Their movement broke the silence. The hum returned, low again but closer, inside my ears, inside my chest. It wasn't around me anymore. It was in me. Every breath came with a tremor. Every blink made the shadows pulse brighter. They leaned closer, not touching, just hovering at the edge of the fog. I could feel the vibration between us, the air trembling like something unseen was passing through it. Then one of them spoke, not in words, in tone. The hum rose through a narrow pitch, and for a heartbeat, I understood it. It wasn't saying something to me. It was saying something about me. And then they stopped. The hum faded. The shapes unraveled into the mist, melting back into the trees. Only silence remained. No footsteps, no breath, just a faint echo of vibration lingering beneath my ribs. I stood there for a long time, waiting for it to return. It didn't. But even now, when the forest is quiet and the fog feels too still, I can feel that low hum hiding somewhere inside my chest, waiting for something to start again. The trail ended abruptly. At least the one I knew. Beyond it, the forest was dense, unfamiliar. I stepped forward, and my boots sank into soft, damp soil. The fog thickened around me, coiling between the trunks like slow smoke. Everything quieted. No rustle of leaves, no whisper of wind, just my breath and the faint pulse of the earth beneath me. Then I saw it, a path, not on my map, winding, narrow, vanishing into the fog. The air smelled faintly metallic, like rain on iron. Each step felt heavier than the last. The fog pressed close to my skin, cold and wet. A pale light appeared ahead, floating just above the ground. Soft, steady, and strangely alive. I moved toward it. It stopped, hanging in the air, waiting. I stepped closer. The light shifted. Not with me, but away from me. A shiver ran down my spine. The forest felt different here. Older, silent in a way that felt deliberate. The path was lined with shadows. Long, thin, bending unnaturally. They stretched into fog, fading before they could be recognized. I could hear my own heart, each beat echoing like a drum in the hush. My breath hung in the cold air, visible as fragile ghosts before fading. The light pulsed once, then again, a rhythm that wasn't mine. I followed it carefully, saw footsteps pressing into wet leaves. The fog thickened. Each movement blurred the edges of the world. The trees leaned closer, their bark slick with dew. Something moved just out of sight. I couldn't tell what. A shadow? A branch swaying? Or something else entirely. The light shifted again. A gentle sway, almost beckoning. I stepped forward, and the forest seemed to exhale. The mist parted slightly, revealing the narrow trail ahead. The path twisted. The light paused at every turn, waiting for me to follow. Not threatening, but aware like it had a mind of its own. I felt the silence pressing against me. Cold, heavy, almost tactile. It wrapped around my shoulders, clinging, pulling me toward the unknown. The air was damp with earth and decay. Every leaf underfoot was slick. Every twig seemed to echo in the stillness. I stopped again. The light hovered ahead, waiting at the curve of the path. I held my breath. It pulsed faintly. I could feel its rhythm in my chest, soft and deliberate. I took a single step forward. The light moved back, pausing just beyond reach. The fog thickened even more. I could barely see the ground at my feet. The path was hidden beneath layers of white, like it had never been walked before. I reached out. The air felt thick, almost viscous, resisting my hand. The light pulsed again. I thought I saw a shape within it. Faint outlines. Eyes? Or just shadows playing tricks. I blinked. It vanished. Silence closed in. No hum, no rustle, no movement. Just a faint mist curling around me and a distant pale glow still ahead. I stepped forward again. The path revealed itself slowly, like it was breathing, leading me deeper into the forest. The air pressed in closer. The fog clung to my skin, wet and cold. Every breath felt heavy. The light paused one final time. Then it drifted forward. A gentle, slow pull. I followed, step by step, into the unmarked, into the unknown, where the forest waited with patient, silent eyes. The forest felt thinner tonight, mist curling low over the ground, clinging to my boots, cold and damp. Each step I took pressed softly into wet leaves. The rustle was louder than it should have been, like the forest itself was listening. I sensed it before I saw anything. A presence. Following. It mirrored my pace, soft, deliberate, just beyond the veil of fog. I turned. Nothing. Only shadows pooling between the trees, bending in the pale light of the moon. I moved again, and it moved with me. Every step, every pause reflected back. The air smelled damp, earthy, with a faint metallic tang. My breath hung visibly, a ghost before fading into mist. The fog thickened as I pressed forward. Branches leaned closer, their leaves slick and whispering. The forest seemed to fold around me, corralling me through the pathless undergrowth. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. But when I glanced over my shoulder, there was nothing, only shifting shadows and the lingering sense of eyes. I stopped, listening. The silence stretched, thick and watchful. A twig snapped far ahead, or maybe behind. I couldn't tell. The sound dissolved into fog. I walked again. The presence stayed. It didn't chase, it didn't approach. It simply existed, folded into every shadow, trailing my movements like a second skin. The fog pressed at my face now, wet and cold, sticking to my hair and skin. I could feel it breathing with me, the air vibrating faintly, like something exhaled just behind my shoulder. I turned slowly, half expecting to see a figure, but the forest remained empty. The shadows shifted, but never settled into shape. A branch overhead creaked. I flinched. The sound lingered too long, echoing in the stillness. My heartbeat filled my ears. I moved faster. Soft steps swallowed by fog. The presence followed, always following. The mist curled around tree trunks like fingers, trailing along the ground in sinuous waves. Each movement carried its own weight. The forest itself seemed to breathe, its exhalation brushing against my skin. I tried call out. My voice came as a whisper, fragile and swallowed instantly. No answer came. The shadows shifted in tandem with the fog. Shapes folded, unfolded, never settling, always watching. I stopped again. The silence pressed close. A static hum rose somewhere beneath the trees, or maybe inside my head. I turned slowly, scanning every curve of mist, every dark patch between trunks. Nothing moved, and yet I knew it was there. A step forward, a step backward. The presence stayed aligned with me, just at the edge of sight. I felt eyes, not human, not formed, just watching, breathing, patient. The air grew colder. My breath came faster. The mist rose to waist level, clinging to clothing, skin, hair. The forest was silent, but the weight of the unseen kept me alert. I blinked. The shadows shimmered. One twisted slightly, following the line of my gaze. I jerked my head away. The presence remained. I realized then it didn't need shape. It didn't need form. It existed as awareness, folded into the fog, trailing every step, every exhalation, every heartbeat. I began to move again, careful, measured, letting the forest swallow me as I went. The mist thickened around my ankles, the damp smell of earth and decay rising in my nose. Every step left an imprint in soft soil, and just beyond, I felt it there, tracking, observing, never stepping forward, never letting go. I glanced back one final time. Nothing. Only fog, only shifting shadows, only the silent witness that had walked with me, and would continue to do so long after I left this path. The night air was still. Fog lingered low, wrapping the rocks in a wet, cold embrace. Each breath came out in ghostly spirals. I walked slowly, boots sinking into damp moss, the smell of earth and stone thick around me. Every sound, a twig snapping, leaves shifting, felt magnified, almost alive. A light appeared ahead, pale, floating near a jagged outcrop of rock. It moved gently, like a heartbeat suspended in air. I couldn't look away. It hovered there, casting soft shadows that twisted across the fog. The shape seemed deliberate, bending the mist with each pulse. And then I heard it, a hum, low, resonant, vibrating through my chest. Soft at first, almost comforting, but it changed, layered, melodic. It swirled around me, tugging at the edges of thought. I wanted to look away, to step back, but my eyes refused. The light shifted slightly, a slow drift along the rock face. The mist curled around it like water, reflecting the pale glow in tiny, fleeting patterns. The hum grew stronger. It filled my ears, my chest, my mind. Each pulse synchronized with my heartbeat, until I could no longer tell where it ended, and I began. Shadows began to stretch and bend. Long, thin forms twisted through the fog, rising like whispers of movement. They were not solid, not real, but felt present, aware. I stepped closer. The fog brushed my face, cold and damp, like a soft hand guiding me. The rocks beneath my feet were slick. Every step made a tiny splash in shallow puddles. The hum intensified. It swirled around me, and I thought I could hear words hidden inside the melody. A soft beckoning, not spoken, but insistent. The light moved again, flickering, pulsing, as if alive and breathing. Each pulse cast the fog into shifting patterns, shapes that almost resembled eyes, then vanished. I tried to look away. My head ached. My body trembled, but the light held me. Closer now, floating just above the jagged rocks. I could feel the warmth of it on my skin, soft, unnatural, inviting. The hum changed once more. A higher note layered over the low vibration. It carried a rhythm, deliberate, hypnotic. I realized I was swaying slightly, mirroring the sound. Pulled along by it, the shadows behind the light stretched taller, leaning toward me, folding into each other, vanishing again when I blinked. I knelt to steady myself. The air smelled of wet stone, moss, and something faintly metallic. My breath hung like smoke. The fog thickened around me, blurring the edges of the world. The light pulsed again, a single, sharp beat, and the shadows converged toward it. For a moment, it felt like the forest itself had held its breath. I rose slowly. The hum wrapped tighter around me, as if aware of my hesitation. The light floated a little closer, casting long, curling shadows across the rocks. I took another step. The fog seemed to part, revealing a path among jagged stones. Each pulse of the hum seemed to guide me, softly, irresistibly. The light drifted higher, hovering just above a narrow crevice in the rock. It flickered, and in that flicker, I thought I saw a movement. Something, no, someone watching from inside the mist. I froze. The hum softened, almost questioning, hovering in the silence between beats. The shadows quivered, and the fog swirled around the light in slow, liquid motion. I felt drawn forward, step by step, toward the crevice, toward the source of the humming. The air vibrated with a rhythm, prickling my skin, filling my chest with a weight I could not resist. The light pulsed once more. Shadows flickered in patterns I could not name. I reached the crevice. The fog parted slightly, revealing smooth stone beneath. And then the light rose higher, beyond reach, beyond sight. The hum softened, dropping to a single, steady note. as though it had released me, or perhaps simply decided I had followed far enough. The mist thickened again. The shadows retreated into nothingness. The forest exhaled, leaving only the cold scent of stone and damp moss. I stood alone, breath visible, ragged. The pale glow had vanished, but the hum lingered faintly in my chest, a reminder that the forest had not finished with me. The fog lay heavy tonight. It wrapped the forest in damp, cold sheets, curling around trunks, weaving through branches. Every step I took sank slightly into wet earth. The smell of moss and decay hung thick. My breath came out in white spirals, hanging before fading into the mist. Shadows stretched, twisted, like liquid, drifting over the ground. I paused. A figure, or just a trick of fog, peeked from behind a gnarled trunk. Gone when I blinked. I moved again. The shadows shifted with me, bending, curling, stretching, always at the edge of vision. The forest felt immense, older than memory. Every tree a sentinel, every rustle of leaves a whisper. Shapes flickered in the corners of my sight. I wanted to turn to see them clearly, but each time I looked, the trunks were empty. I shivered. The cold fog pressed against my skin, wet, damp, heavy. It filled my clothes, clung to my hair. Something moved again. Across the path, just beyond the reach of the pale light, a shadow slithered between trunks, stretching longer than it should. I felt small, insignificant. Watched. The weight of the unseen pressed close. Soft footsteps echoed, but not mine, a rhythm in the mist, too light to be certain, yet undeniable. I breathed slowly, trying to steady my pulse. The forest didn't answer. It waited. Shadows stretched toward me, liquid fingers reaching through fog. Shapes emerged briefly. Faces, maybe, or memories of them, vanishing before recognition. The fog thickened further. It pooled in hollows, wrapped around my legs. The ground smelled of wet leaves and soil. Every step I took left a faint imprint that the mist tried to erase. I felt eyes again. Countless, floating just beyond comprehension. The trees themselves seemed aware, bent toward me, leaning in with silent patience. I moved carefully. The shadows shifted, drifting between trunks, following without sound, watching without breath. A branch creaked. I flinched. The sound lingered, too deliberate to be casual. My heart echoed it, thumping in sync with unseen movement. I stopped completely. The fog hung, thick and unmoving. The shadows paused, as though waiting for me to continue. I felt the damp chill crawling into my sleeves, into my collar, the mist clinging like it had weight, like it had intention. Shapes flickered again, long and thin, stretching over the mossy ground. I could almost see them breathing, almost hear whispers carried in the fog. I exhaled slowly. The mist rose and fell around me, swirling with the shifting shadows. The forest watched. Always. I took a soft step forward. The shadows followed. The fog parted just enough to let me move. Not welcoming, not threatening, simply present, bearing silent witness. I kept walking, step by careful step. The shadows drifted with me, the fog pressing close, and I knew I was not alone. The forest exhaled slowly. The shapes receded just beyond the light. I was still small, still watched, and yet I moved forward, into the quiet, into the mist, and into the waiting shadows. The fog hung low tonight, thick, cold, damp against my skin. Each step pressed into soft moss, leaving a faint imprint behind. The air smelled of wet earth, decay, and something faintly metallic. It clung to my clothes, to my hair, to my breath. Faint glimmers appeared among the trees. At first, I thought they were stones catching pale light. Then eyes? Small, reflective, fleeting. They caught the glow of the moon and vanished when I looked directly. I moved slowly, careful not to disturb the forest. The mist swirled around my legs, curling like liquid smoke. The forest seemed to breathe with me, or perhaps I was breathing with it. Shadows stretched along trunks. They twisted and shifted in the corner of my vision. Every time I thought I caught a shape, it would dissolve into fog again. The eyes flickered. One here, one there. Too many to count, yet just beyond understanding. I felt small, insignificant. The trees loomed, ancient and silent. Every leaf seemed to rustle with hidden intent. I stopped, listening. The fog was quiet, yet alive. A subtle hum vibrated through the ground, through my boots, through my chest. The eyes blinked, or so it seemed. Reflections shifted, catching the moonlight in a way that felt deliberate. I couldn't look away. The forest seemed to lean closer. Branches curved like fingers. The fog coiled around trunks like smoke. Each movement, subtle, deliberate, carried a weight I could feel pressing on my skin. I stepped forward. The eyes followed, not moving, not running, just watching. A fallen branch creaked underfoot. The sound echoed far and wide, yet the fog swallowed it immediately. Nothing responded, but the eyes remained. I inhaled. The mist tasted damp and earthy, a hint of something iron-like in the back of my throat. Every breath seemed to carry whispers, not words, not sounds I could name. Shadows shifted again. Shapes stretched across moss and stone, folding in and out of reality. I felt the forest pulse beneath me, alive in a way I could not define. The eyes gleamed brighter now, some high on the trunks, some low among roots. They blinked, they lingered, and they seemed aware of my presence. I kept moving. Soft footsteps swallowed in fog. Every step pressed me deeper into the forest. The mist thickened, curling along my clothes, wrapping around my ankles. I paused once more. The air was almost still, but the forest breathed in synchrony with me. Each rustle of leaves, each subtle shift of shadows, heightened the sense of quiet terror. A faint metallic tang lingered in the air. The eyes reflected it, glinting as though acknowledging my movement. I felt observed, every inch of me accounted for, yet no form revealed itself. The fog carried sound differently. Footfalls seemed to stretch, echoing longer than possible. A soft sigh passed through the trees. The eyes blinked again, then vanished entirely. I exhaled. The mist swallowed my breath. The forest returned to stillness. Only the faint memory of reflected eyes lingered among the fog-shrouded trees. I walked on, alone, breath visible, feet pressing softly into moss, with the quiet awareness that the forest had watched me, and it would continue watching long after I disappeared from its fog-laden paths. The fog lay thick over the clearing. Cold and damp, it wrapped around the trees and rocks, pressing against my skin. An orb hovered just ahead, stationary. Its pale light stretched long shadows across the ground. The shapes seemed alive, bending in impossible ways. I stepped closer. The mist clung to my clothes, soft and wet. The air smelled of earth and something faintly metallic. Silence pressed down. Not a single rustle of leaves, not a whisper of wind. It felt alive, heavy, expectant. A subtle vibration ran through the ground beneath me, barely perceptible at first, then stronger, pulsing through my boots, my chest, a low thrum that seemed tied to the orb itself. I froze. The orb remained still, light steady, casting shadows that stretched and recoiled with the fog. Shapes flickered at the edge of vision, dark forms behind the trees, twisting in ways that felt deliberate. I turned slowly. Nothing moved, yet I felt watched. The mist swirled. It curled around the orb, like smoke drawn to flame. The shadows stretched longer, thinner, leaning into the fog, bending toward me. I inhaled. The damp air filled my lungs, cool and metallic, heavy with the forest's quiet weight. Soft vibrations hummed through the earth again. Step by careful step, I moved closer, feeling the subtle pulse beneath my feet, synchronized with a heartbeat I didn't recognize as my own. The orb's light flickered ever so slightly. Shadows twitched in response, elongating across roots and rocks. The fog shifted like liquid, wrapping around shapes, hiding what might be there, or showing it in glimpses that vanished too quickly to grasp. I shivered. The cold dampness crawled into my sleeves, slid down my neck. The silence deepened. The forest seemed to exhale slowly around me, pressing the stillness into my chest. I knelt to steady myself. The ground pulsed beneath my knees, soft vibrations running through stone and soil. The orb hovered, still, endless. A faint rustle passed through the trees, subtle, almost imagined, but the fog thickened in response, curling around shadows, as if hiding them from me. I rose slowly. The vibration thrummed gently through my bones. Shadows stretched toward me again. The orb's light illuminated the edges of the mist, revealing twisted, unreal shapes that disappear when I looked directly. The air tasted damp and metallic. My breath lingered in soft clouds, vanishing as quickly as it appeared. The silence pressed closer. I could feel it brushing against my ears, settling on my shoulders. I took another step. Soft footfalls on wet moss. The orb remained, its light unwavering, casting long shadows that seemed to lean closer with every step. The forest exhaled slowly. Branches swayed without wind. Shadows shifted, bending the fog. The vibration underfoot persisted, subtle but insistent, a rhythm tied to the orb, to the forest, to something beyond me. I paused. The orb's light reflected in tiny droplets of mist, catching on branches and rocks like watchful eyes. The fog thickened around it, curling as if alive. I stood alone, breath visible, heart thrumming. The orb hovered, unmoving, shadows leaning, silence stretching endlessly. Step by step, I moved forward. The fog parted just enough to guide me. The vibration beneath me hummed with quiet insistence, and I realized the forest itself was awake, watching, waiting. The fog draped over the trees tonight, thick, damp, almost heavy against my skin. Each step pressed into moss, soft and cold. Leaves trembled around me, though the air was still. A subtle quiver passed through branches, like the forest itself inhaling. The mist shifted. It curled and folded, pausing, then releasing, as though breathing in quiet rhythm. Shapes lingered in the periphery, dark, twisting forms among the trunks. I caught movement just out of sight. Then it vanished as if swallowed by the fog. The earth smelled damp, a faint metallic tang riding the mist. I felt the soft pulse of moss beneath my boots, almost synchronized with my own heartbeat. I moved slowly. Every step seemed to echo, yet the fog swallowed the sound immediately. Shadows stretched and leaned, subtle, deliberate. Leaves quivered again, casting small, trembling patterns on the ground. I felt the forest inhale, then exhale, its rhythm deep and slow. A subtle rustle passed through the undergrowth. Not wind, something else. Watching, moving just out of focus. I stopped. The fog thickened, curling around my legs, pressing gently, softly, like the forest was aware of me. Shapes drifted in the corner of my vision. Faint silhouettes, impossible to name. They moved with the fog, then merged back into nothing. The air tasted damp and earthy. Each breath lingered in misty clouds, vanishing into the fog as quickly as it appeared. Branches leaned slightly, casting long, thin shadows. They shifted with the rhythm of the forest, stretching and pulling like living things. I could hear my heartbeat thudding softly in my ears, and it felt echoed as if the forest itself beat along with me. Soft footsteps on moss, my own, pressed lightly into the wet earth. The shapes drifted again. I thought I saw a pale light glint from their edges. Then nothing. I felt small, insignificant, alone. And yet, the forest was awake around me. The fog pulsed once more, inhaling deep, exhaling slowly. A rhythm both calm and unsettling, like a slow, deliberate heartbeat around me. I walked on, step by careful step. The forest seemed to breathe with me, the shapes drifting in tandem, never near, never far, just present, watching, alive. I stopped again. The fog settled around me like a veil. The earth beneath pressed softly against my boots. The mist swirled, shadows shifted, and I realized the forest was not silent. It was breathing, and I was a quiet part of its exhale. The mountain loomed ahead, shrouded in fog, so thick it swallowed the trail. The air smelled of damp stone and cold earth. A faint glow blinked in the distance, pale, unsteady like a signal. It pulsed once, then vanished. I stepped forward. The mist pressed against my face, cool and damp. Every breath lingered like a ghost. The glow reappeared, shifting slightly. I quickened my pace. Leaves rustled underfoot, soft and wet. Shadows stretched across rocks and twisted roots. The fog seemed alive, curling, hiding, revealing shapes just out of sight. The light blinked again. Closer, it seemed, yet when I approached, it slipped further up the slope. Slow, deliberate, the air tasted of moss and stone. A faint metallic tang carried through the mist. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and uneven, echoing in my chest. I paused. The glow flickered once, then vanished behind a dense wall of fog. A low hum vibrated in the distance, barely perceptible, but impossible to ignore. Step by careful step, I moved forward. The fog clung to my clothes, wet and heavy. Branches brushed my arms without wind, shaking softly, deliberately. The glow reappeared, higher now, blinking like a distant eye. Each blink seemed to watch me, measuring, waiting. I felt the fog shift around me. It pressed closer, soft, silent, almost breathing. Shadows bent with it, leaning toward the light. I took another step. The ground was slick with wet leaves and stone. Soft vibrations ran through the slope, echoing faintly with each pulse of the glow. The light blinked again. I noticed shapes drifting at the edges of vision, dark, twisting forms just beyond recognition. The fog thickened, curling around the trees, masking movement, amplifying the silence. Every inhale felt heavier, every breath damp and cold. I moved closer. The glow pulled upward, slow, deliberate, leading me higher along the mountain spine. The shadows stretched long and thin, leaning toward it, then retreating when I looked directly. I paused on a rock, hands pressed to wet stone, breath visible in the mist. The glow blinked, then shifted sideways, as if inviting me forward. The slope steepened. Fog wrapped around my legs, slippery, insistent. Branches tapped softly against my shoulders, as if reminding me that I was not alone. I pressed on. The glow moved ahead, a faint pulse of pale light through the swirling fog. Each blink drew my attention, curiosity and unease twisting together. Shadows danced in the periphery. Forms drifted closer, then melted back into mist. The glow hovered just out of reach, pale and hypnotic. I reached the edge of the cliff. The fog parted slightly, revealing the distant glow, blinking slowly, deliberately, casting long, shifting shadows across the slope. I felt the cold press through my coat. The earth vibrated softly beneath my boots, matching the blink of the light. I exhaled. The mist swirled around me, shadows bending, curling. The glow pulsed once more, then drifted slowly higher into the fog, beyond reach, beyond understanding. I stood alone, breath rising in clouds, heart thudding unevenly. The fog moved, alive and patient, and the distant glow lingered like a secret waiting just beyond the edge of sight. The rocks jutted sharply, slick with mist and cold. The air smelled of wet stone and pine. A whisper drifted across the slope, soft, deliberate. My name. I stopped, breath caught in my chest. The fog pressed close, clinging to my clothes and hair. The whisper echoed again, closer now. Yet when I strained to listen, there was nothing. Shadows stretched long across the stones. The fog curled around them, twisting, almost alive. Each inhale felt heavy, damp, filling my lungs with chill. Soft footsteps crunched somewhere behind me, or maybe it was the rocks shifting. Every nerve felt exposed, every sense alert. The whisper returned, barely audible, like the forest itself was breathing through the fog. I moved forward. The mist clung to my skin, cold and damp, trailing my every step. A faint rustle passed over the stones. Branches brushed against each other, though the air was still. Shadows bent in impossible ways, leaning toward the sound, then retreating when I tried to focus. I called out softly, my own voice swallowed by the fog. The whisper answered, then vanished. Empty silence filled the space. I paused on a ledge, with stone under my hands. The air vibrated faintly, like a heartbeat in the ground. But the sound, the whisper, was gone. I could feel shapes drifting just beyond sight, darkness pooling between rocks, then dissipating into fog. I moved slowly, breath rising in visible clouds, heart thudding against ribs. Another whisper teased the edges of hearing. I leaned forward, straining, but it vanished before my ears could catch it. Only silence remained, heavy, oppressive, and waiting. The fog thickened. It pressed against my legs, cold and insistent. Every rock and branch seemed to shift slightly, as if acknowledging something I could not see. The whisper returned once more, so soft I almost missed it. It curled around the mist, slipping past my ears, then disappeared into nothing. I stopped completely. The world felt unreal. Air tasted of damp stone and distant frost. I could hear the faint rustle of fog moving, breathing along with me. Soft shadows moved at the edges of sight. The rocks gleamed pale in the diffuse light, wet and slippery under my fingers. I could feel eyes, or maybe the fog itself, watching. The whisper was gone again. I waited, heart thumping unevenly, breath rising in clouds. The forest was alive with silence. Every sound I made seemed to echo, then vanish into the mist. And I understood the whisper might never return, but its absence pressed heavier than any voice could. I stepped forward slowly. Fog wrapped around me, shadows swaying gently. Every step carried a quiet dread, a hollow, lingering echo of a sound that vanished before it could be heard. The mist swallowed the trail ahead. The rocks gleamed faintly. I could feel the whisper lingering like a ghost in the air, close, and yet impossible to grasp. I moved on, alone, breath rising in clouds, the forest holding its secrets tight. And somewhere just beyond sight, the vanished sound waited. The forest lay still. Fog curled between the trunks, dense and cold against my skin. Branches trembled above, though the air carried no wind. A shiver ran through them, like the trees themselves were alive. Shadows stretched and twisted, bending in ways that felt wrong. Each step I took pressed softly on wet needles, my breath visible in pale clouds. A hum rose from the fog, metallic, low, almost imperceptible. It vibrated through my chest, and the ground beneath me seemed to pulse in rhythm. I froze. Eyes darted to every movement in the periphery. Shadows bent and swayed, then vanished when I blinked. Branches quivered again, shivering like nervous hands. Leaves whispered against one another, though there was no breeze. The hum grew faintly louder. It wrapped around the mist, slipping past ears, touching my skin like a cold hand. A sense of being watched rose from the fog. Shapes drifted just beyond vision. I could not tell if they were shadows or something more deliberate. The forest seemed to inhale, then exhale slowly, pulling the fog toward me and letting it settle on my shoulders. Soft footsteps echoed somewhere behind a curve, but nothing appeared when I turned. The metallic hum mingled with distant rustling, like the forest itself was breathing with intention. I moved carefully forward, branches brushing my arms, cold mist clinging to every fold of clothing. Shadows shifted in time with the hum, lengthening, shrinking, always just out of focus. The ground underfoot was uneven, stones slick with moisture, roots curling like silent fingers. I could feel the vibration from the hum of my toes, like the earth itself was restless. Above me, the shivering branches formed strange patterns. I thought I glimpsed eyes among the leaves, pale glints that disappeared when I blinked. A shiver passed down my spine. I stopped and listened. Silence stretched between the hums. Every sound, the faint snap of twigs, my own breathing, seemed amplified, then swallowed by the fog. The metallic hum shifted, rising and falling like waves. Shadows coiled closer, then retreated when I focused. A weight pressed at the edges of my awareness. I ran my fingers along a wet trunk. The bark was rough, damp, cold enough to bite the skin. The fog pressed closer, wrapping around my legs, slithering up my arms. Another quiver of branches above. So sudden it startled me. The shadows writhed with emotion, sliding across the ground like liquid darkness. The hum sank lower, leaving a hollow emptiness behind. The fog seemed to thicken, enclosing the path in muffled gray. I moved on cautiously, breath rising in small, visible puffs. Every step was deliberate, pressing softly on needles and stone. Branches shivered again, echoing a pulse that matched my heartbeat. The metallic vibration lingered, touching skin and bone, then slipping back into the fog. I paused at clearing. Silence stretched thin, broken only by the whisper of trembling leaves. Shadows hung in corners of vision, then vanished when I tried to see them directly. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Shivering branches, twisting shadows, the lingering hum. Everything pressed close, watching, waiting. I exhaled slowly, feeling the damp fog slide off my skin. The metallic hum faded to almost nothing. Shadows retreated to the edges of the trees. I stepped forward. Branches still shivered lightly, but the pressing weight lifted slightly. The forest remained alive with quiet dread, its secrets clinging to the fog, always just beyond reach. I kept moving, soft footsteps on damp needles, fog swirling around me, leaving the shivering trees behind. The fog pressed close around me, dense and damp, curling through the trees, every step softened by wet needles, every breath rising in small, visible clouds. The path I followed disappeared beneath the white haze. Shadows bent at the edges of vision, then slipped away when I tried to focus. I slowed, listening. Leaves whispered against each other, though there was no wind. A faint hum lingered beneath the fog, barely felt in my chest. Shapes moved just out of sight, a flicker between trunks, a shadow brushing a boulder. I thought I saw eyes, but they vanished when I blinked. The fog wrapped tighter around me. Cold droplets clung to my skin. Every step felt guided, as though the trail itself breathed, pulling me forward and holding me in place. I pressed on cautiously. Branches brushed my arms, rustling with the same pulse I felt underfoot. The hum rose briefly, then sank into silence. A sense of being watched rose behind every movement. Mist drifted low, clinging to my boots, trailing up my legs like gentle fingers. I could hear nothing beyond my breathing and the soft scrape of roots beneath my feet. The shapes moved again. A flicker, just a hint, always avoiding the edges of direct sight. I felt trapped in a living maze, fog curling in loops, folding back on itself. I paused. The world had become gray and soft, shadowed shapes floating in mist. The trail I thought I knew had vanished entirely. A shiver ran through me, branches quivering overhead, though the air remained still. The fog dampened sound, yet carried a strange vibration, like the trail itself was breathing. Soft footsteps echoed behind me. I stopped. Nothing appeared when I turned. The fog swallowed motion, leaving only the echo of presence. A flicker of pale light appeared ahead, hovering just at the edge of vision. I moved toward it slowly, but it shifted, keeping distance. The path was unseen, yet I could feel its pull. Each step brought me deeper, fog pressing around shoulders and face. The forest seemed to tighten, folding in on itself with quiet intention. I strained to see, to make out familiar shapes, but only the shifting haze met my gaze. Cold damp touched my hands, fog coiling like smoke around my fingers. Shapes drifted again, avoiding full sight, slipping just beyond the reach of my eyes. I felt guided and trapped at once, moving without knowing where, each breath misting into nothing. The soft hum returned, metallic, faint, vibrating through the soles of my boots. Shadows lengthened and shrank with it, never standing still, always just out of reach. I moved forward, feet crunching softly on hidden roots, branches brushing wet skin. The fog pressed in tighter, shaping around me like a living thing. Every step felt measured, every movement observed. The unseen trail had swallowed the forest whole, and I was nothing more than a breath in its vast, watching silence. I exhaled slowly, letting the fog slide over my face. Soft, shivering shapes lingered at the edges, and the trail continued onward, hidden, guiding, never letting go. The mist clung to the forest floor, heavy and damp, curling around roots and rocks. Each breath hung white and cold, drifting in the still air. Light flickered through the fog, not steady, but pulsing, like a heartbeat barely contained. Shadows danced across trunks, elongated, shifting in impossible ways. I moved slowly, soft footsteps muted by the thick needles. The hum came then, vibrating faintly through my chest, resonating from somewhere high above. Shapes appeared in the haze, impossible angles, edges that shouldn't exist in the world I know. I blinked, and they dissolved. The fog absorbed them, leaving only a faint shimmer. The hum rose again, not loud but insistent, curling around the fog. It pressed against my skin, traced a line in my spine, filled the spaces between each cautious step. I reached out, fingers brushing wet leaves. They glistened in the flickering light, as though tiny eyes stared back. A subtle rustle followed me, though I could see nothing moving. The shapes returned, glinting angles, hovering briefly, then vanishing when I looked directly. The mist thickened, coiling between trees, turning the familiar forest into a strange, living place. I inhaled slowly. The air smelled damp, earthy, metallic. Every sense sharpened, yet I felt weightless, ungrounded. The hum carried something. A pattern, a cadence that drew my gaze upward. Above, the fog swirled like smoke, revealing fleeting forms, their edges blurred by the mist. They weren't birds, weren't branches, and yet they moved with intent. I froze. Every step I took echoed softly in the quiet. The flickering light pulsed in time with the hum, and shadows stretched in the corners of my vision. I felt observed, not by eyes I could see, but by the rhythm of the shapes themselves. A small breeze touched my cheek, though the air had been still. The scent of cold stone drifted in, sharp, metallic, blending with the wet earth. I shivered. The light shifted, falling across the fog like a pale hand. Glimmers revealed surfaces smooth and curved, reflecting nothing and everything at once. Impossible angles. Glimpses of forms that should not exist. The hum deepened, resonating beneath the ground, through the soles of my boots. The forest seemed to breathe with it, rising and falling, a living pulse of fog and shadow. I stepped forward, letting the mist curl over my legs, the damp leaves brushing my fingers. Each movement was mirrored by subtle shifts in the shapes above, the flickering light bending with them. Silence returned briefly. My breath seemed louder than the world around me. Then the hum returned, melodic this time, sliding through the trees, drawing my eyes to the upper canopy. Shapes hovered, twisting slowly, catching the flickering light. I blinked, and they disappeared, leaving only the fog and the pulse of the hum. I felt drawn upward, compelled to look through the mist, to follow the rhythm of the shapes. The forest itself seemed to fold inward, wrapping me in fog and flickering light. Soft and alien, yet mesmerizing. The hum faded to a low vibration, and the flickering dimmed, leaving the mist thick and still once more. The shapes lingered the edges of vision, never fully gone, never fully near. I exhaled, letting the fog slide over my face. Soft footsteps, real or imagined, echoed behind me. The forest remained, breathing, pulsing, and the flickering haze lingered, a rhythm I could feel even after I stopped moving. The climb had left my legs heavy, but the summit stretched before me, swallowed in a tide of fog. The air was thin, biting at my lungs with every inhale. Moisture clung to my skin, cold and sharp. Shadows twisted across the rocks, forming angles that shouldn't exist. I blinked, and they shifted, liquid, impossible, unbound by gravity. A quiet hum vibrated in the stone beneath my boots. It wasn't loud, yet it pressed against my chest and against the fog rolling in like a tide. The summit was empty, yet I felt observed. Something lingered just beyond sight, its shape hidden in the curling mist. I stepped forward. Soft grit crunched beneath my shoes, a sharp scent of damp stone rising in the air. Each breath fogged in front of my face, and each exhale felt too loud, too intrusive. The shadows pulsed with the fog, angles that bent the edges of the world. The rocks glistened pale, as though slick with some unseen moisture. A sudden breeze whispered across the ridge, carrying the faint metallic scent of cold iron. I shivered. The fog clung tighter now, wrapping the summit in gray silence. I crouched to touch the ground, cold, rough stone, yet vibrating faintly under my fingertips. The hum resonated from somewhere deep, somewhere beyond the mist, drawing my gaze upward. The fog thickened, and shadows grew taller, sharper. The peaks and crevices became strange shapes, forming angles my mind could not reconcile. I took another step. The summit seemed endless, stretching into the mist as if the mountain itself had no edges. Each movement mirrored by a shadow shifting just out of reach, a silent echo of my presence. Light broke faintly through the haze, pale and diffuse, casting the impossible shadows longer, sharper. They leaned, they arched, as if the fog itself was bending around some unseen force. A cold vibration ran through my boots. I froze, every sense heightened. The air smelled of wet stone and distant smoke, the wind whispering faint, unintelligible murmurs. I rose slowly. Soft footsteps, my own, echoed too perfectly in the emptiness. The hum pulsed again, stretching through the fog and my chest alike. I dared to glance around. The summit was still, yet angles and edges moved subtly, like a breathing structure of shadows and mist. It watched, it shifted, and I felt impossibly small. The fog wrapped higher now, curling around jagged rocks, swallowing the edges of the summit. Every step forward felt heavier, as if the fog resisted, pulling, holding, shaping the space around me. I crouched once more, letting fingers brush damp stone, feeling the cold hum vibrate faintly beneath me. The wind fell silent. The world held its breath, and then I understood the summit was empty. Yet not. The shadows, the fog, the strange angles, they were alive, responding, watching, folding the mountain itself into something else. I exhaled, letting the mist curl over my face. The hum receded to a soft vibration. The shadows shifted back, and the fog settled, pale and thick, leaving me alone at the silent summit, held in the quiet dread of something vast and impossible. The fog hung low, thick and cold, settling over the rocks and twisted pines. Each breath rose in pale clouds, lingering too long in the chill air. Something shimmered ahead, a glint metallic, distant, hovering in the gray. It caught the faint moonlight, fractured it, and threw it back like a warning. I stopped. Soft footsteps pressed into the loose stone beneath me. The hum of the air was gone, leaving only the faint crunch of my own movements. The glint remained. It didn't move closer, didn't retreat. It waited, and I felt it in my chest before my eyes. The forest was silent now. No rustle of leaves, no distant calls. Even the fog felt heavier, weighing down the scent of wet pine and stone. I took a cautious step. The metal flickered in rhythm with my heartbeat. Shadows stretched from the trees, long, thin, reaching into the mist, bending unnaturally. I wanted to turn back. Every instinct screamed it, but my legs felt locked in hesitation. My body held hostage by curiosity and fear. The glimmer pulsed softly, like a slow, metallic blink. Each pulse carried the sensation of eyes pressing into my back, watching, waiting. The fog shifted around it, curling like smoke over fire I couldn't see. It gave the light an unnatural gleam, cold, precise, unyielding. I sensed something move behind the haze. Not a shape I could name, just a feeling of presence, a weight in the air, a consciousness hovering at the edge of thought. I breathed in. The fog clung to my nostrils and throat, tinged with something faintly metallic. It made my skin crawl, a shiver running from neck to toes. I stepped closer. The glimmer reacted. It blinked again, and I realized it wasn't just light. It was aware. A static vibration ran underfoot. The ground hummed beneath me. The fog rippled in response. The metallic glint quivered, like it was breathing, alive. I froze. Every nerve screamed, but I couldn't move away. The presence was patient, expectant, a slow, waiting tension that filled the air. A faint whisper brushed against my ear. No words, just a sound that made my teeth ache. The fog thickened, swallowing the edges of the glimmer, yet it remained suspended, bright, alien. I glanced down. The stones beneath me were cold and wet. Each step left a damp print, vanishing almost immediately in the shifting fog. The air smelled of iron and rain, metal and wet stone intertwined. I wanted to turn. Every instinct told me to flee. But something in the glimmer held me, something in the waiting press against my chest. The shadows around me stretched and twisted. Shapes I couldn't name slid along the periphery. I felt their gaze in my bones. Yet I stayed, drawn by the cold, pulsing light. The glimmer blinked once more, and a thin vibration passed through the fog, like the whisper of wings I could not see. I shivered. The world seemed to hold its breath. I exhaled slowly. The mist clung to my lips and eyes, soft and choking. The glint remained, hovering, patient, a quiet, metallic heartbeat in the fog. I took one last step forward. The air pressed closer. The shadows shifted around me, folding the fog into angles my mind couldn't hold. And then I knew I was being watched, guided, trapped, and the metallic glimmer was waiting for something only it understood. I stopped, silent, alone. The fog curled around my feet, the glint pulsing softly in its midst. And I held my breath, listening to the waiting, to the lingering presence, to the tension that would not release me. The fog swallowed everything. The trees, the rocks, even the faint path beneath my feet. All I could see were gray swirls, curling and thick, pressing close to my skin, damp and cold. My breath hung in the air, a ghost I could almost touch. Each exhale carried a quiet warmth, contrasted with the chill that clung to my bones. The hum was there, still, softened now, like a sigh rolling from the depth of the forest. It trembled against my chest, and I felt in my teeth a vibration beneath my tongue. Shadows moved past me, not shapes I could name, just fragments, flickers, passing along the edge of the fog. They were slow, deliberate, like they remembered me from somewhere I could not recall. I stepped forward. The ground was uneven, hidden under mist. A stone pressed cold against my soul. A damp leaf clung to my ankle, its texture rough and slick. I lifted it off, but the sensation lingered. The hum softened further, becoming nearly silence. I could hear my own heartbeat, a slow, irregular drum echoing against the thick gray air. It felt like the forest itself had paused, watching, waiting, holding its breath. Another shadow passed. It moved with a weightless grace, vanishing as soon as I blinked. No sound, no trace, except the soft rustle of fog shifting. I realized I was completely alone. No wind, no birds, no distant creek. Only the pulse of fog and the faint residue of something unseen. A lingering presence that pressed into my mind with soft insistence. I walked slowly. Each step made the fog ripple like water. It clung to my clothes, settled on my hair, filled my lungs with damp coolness. The hum faded to a whisper, then to nothing. The forest seemed to breathe, and I felt the pulse of time slow, stretching in silence. A pale light glimmered faintly ahead, diffuse, almost like the echo of a memory. I moved toward it. It shifted as I approached, never stationary, never quite reachable. The shadows were gone now. Only fog remained, dense and heavy, and the sensation of being observed by eyes I could not see. I paused. My hand brushed a branch, wet with mist. The touch was sharp, cool, reminding me that the world still existed somewhere, or that I existed within it. The sigh of a hum came one last time, a soft exhalation that seemed to carry away everything else. And then silence, complete, oppressive, yet strangely calm. I took another step. The fog shifted beneath my feet. The mist moved with me, curling around my legs like gentle fingers, softly urging, softly resisting. I realized I could not tell where I ended and the forest began. The line had vanished, blurred by fog, by shadow, by quiet. The metallic taste of damp earth filled my mouth. The air smelled of wet stone and pine, intense and unyielding. I breathed in slowly, deliberately, letting it settle into my lungs. The last shadow passed. I did not turn. It did not look back. It left nothing behind except the weight of absence and the sense that the forest had spoken, and I had heard it. I stepped forward again. No path, no light, no sound. Only fog and the quiet pulse of a world that no longer moved. Acceptance settled in. I understood that the forest had no shape, no limit, and perhaps no end. I existed within it, or it existed around me. My breath rose in small clouds, mixing with the fog, becoming one with the air. The hum had gone, the shadows had gone, and yet something remained. I walked forward. The mist shifted at my feet. A final sigh brushed past my ear, soft, distant, almost like a farewell. I was alone, and yet I was not. The forest held me, and I let it. The world, as I knew it, had dissolved. And I took another step, into the lingering gray, into the quiet, into the last whisper.